Hi children, let us begin the other subtopic from the chapter life processes, that is transportation in plant. So as you know, in transportation in plant, two very important complex tissue plays an important role, that is xylem and phloem. The movement of water is done by the xylem and the movement is one-way flow, that is unidirectional. Okay, and whereas the movement of food is done by the phloem and which is a two-way movement, which is a bidirectional movement, right? Another thing to remember is that the movement of water in xylem, energy is not required. It is done by the absorption, that is the ion concentration method, and another, it is done by the transpirational pull. Two important points you have to remember. Whereas the transportation of food by phloem is known as translocation. Okay, and here the ATP is utilized. So the transportation of food, that is a translocation, it is an active transportation. Okay, so you see how the movement of water moves from the root to the shoot of a plant, and also the food that is prepared, that is sugar, to the different parts of a plant for its growth and development. Now we'll study a little bit more about the first about the water transportation. Now how does the water will transport? It moves from the, now the concentration of water outside the root hair is higher than inside the root. So it will move from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. Now this movement, it is done by the help of a suction pressure, and the movement of water is the known as a capillary water. Now here the movement of water through the root hair can be broadly divided in two types. What is symplastic? In symplastic, the water will move within the cell, from the cell to cell, from the cell sap. Can you see this blue line? Whereas other part is known as apoplastic, where the water will move from away from the cell sap. That is, it will move from the intercellular space. It will not pass along the cells of a root. Okay, now how the food movement takes place? It is done by the help of phloem tissue. Now food prepared on the leaves moves to the all the parts of the plant, which we call translocation. Now, how does that do? The food that is prepared on the leaf we call a source, and that is transported to the sieve or a companion cell by the utilizing of ATP. ATP is utilized here, it moves there, and from here it goes to the region where the food needs to reach, either to the root or the tip of a plant, or to the different parts of a plant, or maybe the tip of a shoot or fruit. Anyway, it has to move. Okay, this movement also helps in making the concentration gradient through which the water also moves. Okay, thank you. We'll just see one more video to it, and this video will be very helpful to us. Just I'll show you the video. Okay, so let us see in the video way. This is how the movement of water happens in plant. Okay, so when you pour a water, plant utilizes, water, carbon dioxide, and along with the sunlight in the green part we call chlorophyll, to make a food. That is important. That's why plants are autotrophic in nature. So the sunlight and chlorophyll on leaves are the important component to it. So apart from that, plant also takes, nitrogen, phosphorus from the atmosphere, and the soil, it takes the nutrients, which helps, the concentration gradient formed on the soil to move on. Now, if the distance between the root, soil, and the chlorophyll is small, it can be, water can easily diffuse in through the process of diffusion. But what about if the plant is tall enough, very tall, distance is large between the chlorophyll, soil, and the root? Then here the plant needs much more energy to it. In such cases, a proper system of transportation is essential in tall trees. Now, how does this happen in such, trees which has a different plant structure to it? So, as you know, plant cannot move, so and plant body have a large dead cells, that is in the tissues, which result in a low energy need and also use a slow transport system. So here we are talking about in a large, tall plants. Why do plants need a transport system? Plant need water, mineral salt, and raw material for transport for the process of photosynthesis in order to survive. The water and mineral salt from the soil is transported into plants through roots. They can only be transported through the water carrying tubes in the stem, also known as the xylem. So xylem here plays an important role, as I have discussed earlier. And in xylem also the two major components, that is trachea and vessels. So during the photosynthesis, the leaves, it will absorb the water, and the food that is prepared also is from the leaves needs to transport to the different parts of a plant. Okay, that is by the help of phloem. Transportation by the help of xylem, where the xylem trachea and tissue vessels play an important role to it. These tissues are usually thick-walled, and and this trachea is usually having a tapering end. Okay, and they are considered to be not dead cells actually. This all the trachea and vessels of leaves, stems, roots are interconnected, through which there is a continuous water conduction system in plant happens. Usually this movement of water is against the gravity, so we call negative gravitational pull. Now this movement of water across the plant happens by two strategy we call absorption of water. Okay, in the absorption of water, a gradient is the difference on gradient is formed through the ion concentration. Okay, water ions, due to the presence of different minerals that is there on the root. So more concentration of water is outside outside the root, that is the soil, and the less concentration of water in the root. That is why it moved from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. Now this difference creates a gradient, and because of this gradient, it pushes the water from the high concentration to the lower concentration. This is how the water will move. And this is done by the negative pressure created. That's why I've told you it is a negative gravity pressure. And water flows in a bulk. The other strategy of water transportation is a transpiration, that is a loss of water from the surface of a leaf from stomata, we call transpiration. So this transpiration, that is the loss of water from the arid part of a plant, okay, this is accompanied by evaporation, where sunlight plays an important role. Okay, that creates a suction, okay, or a root pressure. We call a suction pressure or a root pressure on the xylem cells of a root. That means because these are continuous tissues, so water loss from the leaves creates a suction pressure on the roots, okay, which will make the water to move upward through trachea and vessels. This process also helps in maintaining the temperature of a plant. Now, during the daytime, transpiration is the way through which the water conduction happens in the plant, which maintains the balance of ions and between the roots and cells. Whereas at the night, it is the root pressure, okay, or the suction pressure that is created, the difference in the concentration of active ions between the root and the soil. Now, let us come to the transportation of food by the help of a tissue phloem we call translocation. Now, phloems are a conducting cells which have a sieve elements and companion cells. They play an important role. Now, once the food that is synthesized by the process of photosynthesis, which is a product is sucrose and nutrients, a carbohydrate, are transported through phloem upward and downward direction. That's why the movement of food, it is bidirectional in plant. So this process we call translocation. So translocation in the movement of food requires an energy, that is adenosine triphosphate. That is why we call such transportation as an active transportation. So the transportation of food, that is translocation, is an active transportation, whereas that of water, it is a passive transportation where energy is not needed. So all the food that is prepared by the phloem is transported to different parts of a plant, either can be root, shoot, or to the fruit of a plant. Okay, so this is how the entire process of transportation in plant takes place. Sugar is stored in the roots or stem tissue, which is transported to the bud when the bud needs to grow. Thank you. Hope you have understood. Thanks for watching.